بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين الحمد لله. In our lessons on the Maraqi al-Falah, Sharh Nur al-Idah, we have, by the grace of Allah Almighty, reached Babun fi bayani ma la yufsid as-sawm, the chapter on what doesn't invalidate the fast. Correct?
Yes.
Right? So he mentions the things that don't invalidate the fast, and then he tells us about what does invalidate the fast. Right? For various reasons, amongst them, that these are things that are sometimes mistakenly imagined to be invalidators, but they turn out not to be, right? Right? That's broadly the hikmah, that he's talking about the fasting, and and what are the integrals of fasting?
Imsak from food and drink and jima.
Right? Fasting really has a shart. Right? The imsak is a shart. Right? Right? So fasting is really essentially a non-action. Right? Fasting is a non-action. Right? It's not doing certain things. Right? In that sense, right? It is. So there's no need to go into the details of what how you fast validly. You do this and this and this. You just desist. So, which is why the chapter on the things that don't break the fast, this is all conceptually almost like mentioning what would where we would have a'mal as-salah, af'al as-salah, right? The actions of the prayer. These are actions that can happen, that could be thought to affect the prayer, right? Now, fasad and butlan in acts of worship are exactly the same, right? As mentioned by Imam al-Tahtawi, right? Right? But, right? And when it comes to fasting, the things that invalidate are of two types, as we'll see: those that require qada alone, and those that require qada and kafara. And the things that don't invalidate are of two types: those things that don't invalidate and are permitted without dislike, and those that don't invalidate but are makruh. Right? So what affects the prayer either invalidates, and invalidation, fasad and butlan, are the same. Now, the things that invalidate, some require qada and kafara, others only require qada. That those acts that do take place but that they don't invalidate are of two types: those that don't invalidate and are those that don't invalidate and are disliked, and there's those that don't invalidate and are not disliked. That's one classification. The other classification that helps in approaching this is that when you do something invalidating broadly, when you do something invalidating broadly, there are three scenarios, right? Right? And you could do something that invalidates deliberately, erroneously, or forgetfully. عمدا, خطأ, and ناسيا. Right? So it could be عمدا, deliberate, right? Where you do, now the qiyas, the analogy, the qiyas is that if you do an invalidating action deliberately or forgetfully, deliberately, erroneously, or forgetfully, the qiyas is in all scenarios an invalidator took place, it's invalidated. Right? Right? Deliberately for, right? Now, however, the exception is made, the exception is made, right? The exception is made for the forgetful. The exception is made for the forgetfulness by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Forgetfulness, right? The exception is made for forgetfulness and not for the other three categories. The deliberate is obvious, right? Right? The deliberate is obvious, right? Which is you chose to do it consciously, conscious of what you're doing. That is the deliberate, right? You chose to do it, right? So now here we have to keep in mind, what is the difference between khata and nisyan, error and forgetfulness. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that if you eat or drink forgetfully, it is excused. So the forgetfulness is excused, the error is not. So errors invalidate because they're on the qiyas. The fast is in the illah, the cause of the fitr, right? The illah of fitr, right? The cause of the invalidation of the fast is for the muftir, wusulu muftirin mu'tabar, for a recognized invalidator. وصول مفطر معتبر إلى جوف معتبر, for a recognized invalidator to reach a recognized part of the jawf, of the body cavity. على وجه معتبر, in a recognized way of entry. Right? So there are three elements to it. The elements of invalidation. وصول مفطر معتبر, إلى جوف معتبر على وجه معتبر. Right? Right? So if an invalidator reaches, the fast is broken. So if it was an error, خطأ, right? Someone was asleep and someone poured water down their mouth. Is that forgetfulness? No. That is error. There was another's error, but it breaks your fast. No sin in it. But because the asl is, if the invalidator reaches the body cavity in a recognized manner, it breaks the fast. The only exception is forgetfulness. And we have a really good, so there's a very good treatise on this in Arabic by Mufti Rafi Usmani. And we should see where it's available for sale. It's a very important book. ضابط المفطرات في الشريعة الإسلامية. There's a good summary of it by Ustad Wasim Hussein that's available on Seeker's Guidance, and we should share it as a resource here in the Maraqi course page. Right? So it's very important to have a clear criteria between forgetfulness and error. So he'll tell us about the cases of forgetfulness, right? To be able to distinguish between forgetfulness and error, but in forgetfulness, it is recommended to fast again to avoid the khilaf of the Sada al-Malikiyya, right? So it's extrinsically recommended out of avoiding the khilaf. Okay, that's some background. So he says, في بيان ما لا باب في بيان ما لا يفسد الصوم, the things that don't invalidate the fast, وهو 24 شيئا, and it's 24 things, right? This is تقريبا, like as he says always, or frequently, this is approximatively, not absolutely, right? Because it depends how you want to count them. تقريبا لا تحديدا بالمرة, right? منها ما لو أكل الصائم أو شرب أو جامع أو جمع بينهما ناسيا. If one eats, if the one fasting eats or drinks or engages in intercourse or does all the above forgetfully. And what is forgetfully? The forgetfulness does not relate. They weren't forgetful of the action, they're forgetful of the fast. Right? They didn't eat forgetfully, right? No, you ate deliberately, but you were forgetful of what? And nasiyan lisomi, forgetting that you were fasting. Forgetting meaning unaware while you were eating or while you were drinking or during intercourse that you were fasting. That's the forgetfulness. And nobody typically would engage in intercourse forgetfully. So, oh, what's happening? Oh, sorry, I was in whatever of these scenarios, right? That's not what is meant, right? 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 So forgetfulness is not, so Imam Tahtawi defines forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is for a matter not to be actively in my mind, in one's mind. And what is the matter that's not in your mind? You're forgetful of the fact that you're fasting. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أكل الصائم ناسيا فإنما هو رزق ساقه الله تعالى إليه فلا قضاء عليه. Because the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari that the Prophet ﷺ said, if the fasting person eats forgetfully, it is but provision that Allah has brought forth for him, so they don't have to make it up. والجماع, so but this talks about akl. وَالْجِمَاعُ فِي مَعْنَاهَا. And intercourse is like eating. How's intercourse like eating? How's intercourse like eating?
حكما.
Yeah, okay, like it, hukman. In what sense?
There are both types of shahwa.
Those types of shahwa, but more specifically here. Yeah, they're two. They're both. The shared meaning is they both invalidate the fast. Right? They're both meanings that invalidate the fast. Right? They're both meanings that invalidate the fast. Right? That is the critical element. Right? They're both meanings that invalidate the fast. Right? So yeah, they're both of the shahwa of, you know, they're both desires, but the relevant matter of them being from the desires is the fact that both of them, what do? Both of them invalidate the fast. So if the invalidator of eating is excused, then the invalidator of intercourse is also excused. And there's other texts that confirm that, right? This is just mentioning how it's understood from that text, right? And there's explicit text. And it falls under more general hadiths, as mentioned by Imam Tahtawi, right? As well. But the reason, like the ulama also say, look, to train you to understand even though there's a very specific hadith about under which the fasting would fall. Are we? What? Okay. Even though it even though there are specific hadiths it falls under, right? Imam Shurunbulali here is training you to how to think about a text. Now, of course, you're not going to derive rulings, right? But that the hadith in Bukhari is not only about that, right? That meanings understood from text by the expression, but also by the dilala and the ishara of the nas, you know, it's established by it, and you should by now be able to distinguish between isharat al-nas and dilalat al-nas. So jima', intercourse, is covered by the text in Bukhari. Is it by dilalat al-nas or by isharat al-nas? Right?
Isharatan.
Right? So think about that. فإن تذكر فرغ من فوره. If one remembers, like so if one is eating or drinking, نزع من فوره, one immediately desists. Right? Right? In intercourse, one has to stop immediately. فإن مكث بعده. But if one remains, even a moment after remembering, the fasting breaks. فإن حرك نفسه ولم ينزع أو نزع ثم أولج لزمته الكفارة. But if one becomes aware and one continued and did not extricate, or one extricated and then resumed, kafara is due. So these are وَلَوْ نَزَعَ خَشْيَةَ طُلُوعِ الْفَجْرِ. If one stopped out of fear of Fajr time having entered, and then many comes out after Fajr, فَأَمْنَى بَعْدَ الْفَجْرِ وَالنَّزَعَ, and many comes out after Fajr, and after one stopped the intercourse, لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ شَيْء, nothing is due. Right? لِعَدَمِ الْجِمَاعِ, because there's no intercourse in form or nor in meaning. Right? And of course, he's talking about intercourse because that's where there'd be some nuance. You could diagram these rulings if you'd like. But if you're eating, if you have something in your mouth, you have to spit it out. You can't just say, well, it's already in my mouth, let me swallow. No. You have to spit it out. وإن كان للناس قدرة على إتمام الصوم إلى الليل بلا مشقة ظاهرة كشاب قوي يذكره من رآه يأكل وإن تركه كره عدم تذكيره في المختار كذا في الفتح. If the one who's eating forgetfully has the ability to complete their fast till the end of the day, such, without difficulty, that's obvious, such as a young person who has the strength, who's strong, doesn't mean they're strong like, they're muscular and, they're part of the, the trainer Bilal Ramadan fitness program or something, but just has قوي, meaning that عنده الظاهر أنه عنده قوة الصيام. That what appears to be the case is that they're able to fast. Then someone who sees them reminds them, right, that it's that you're fasting, right, and this is required, right? It's wajib, and it's and if one doesn't do so, it is makruh not to remind them, according to the chosen opinion, as mentioned in the Fath al-Qadir, and it's makruh tahriman, as Maulana Tahtawi mentions, right? It's makruh tahriman not to remind the fasting person if they're eating forgetfully. And the same thing applies, Maulana Tahtawi says, with respect to the sleeping person. If someone's sleeping through the time, or they forgot about the time, they got engrossed in some action or the other, and they forgot, right? So the sleeping person is not sinful till they wake up, right? But the one who's awake has the wujub of waking the sleeping person up. Unless they're a weak person, unless they're physically weak, then you could leave waking them up because they're technically not sinful for not getting up. And this is the relied upon position, was mentioned in the text. That even though the fast is, the eating is excused, but it is the duty of the one who knows to remind the one who doesn't. وَقِيلَ مَنْ رَأَى غَيْرَهُ فِي رَمَضَانِ يَأْكُلُ نَاسِيًا لَا يُخْبِرُهُ. But there's a second minor opinion, غَيْرُ الْمُخْتَارِ, that if one sees someone eating in Ramadan forgetfully, one does not inform them whether they're able to finish the fast or not. لأن أكله هذا لا يفسد صومه, because this eating does not break their fast. Right? وإذا ذكر الناس وهو يأكل فقيل له إنك صائم فلم يتذكر لزمه القضاء في المختار. If a forgetful person is reminded while they're eating, so they were told that you're fasting, but they didn't remember, they have to do qada in the chosen opinion. Because now they don't have the udhr of nisyan. Right? If someone's told you're fasting and they didn't remember, then they need to consider. They can't continue eating, right? Because there's a required caution. Okay. وإن لم يكن له قوة فالأولى عدم تذكيره. If one sees someone eating forgetfully, but they don't have the strength to finish the fast, that only apply to the weak or the elderly, etc., then it is better not to remind them. Right? But it's better not to remind them, or as Imam Tahtawi points out, Imam Ibn al-Humam used more subtle language. He said, يسعه أن لا يخبره. وسعه أن لا يخبره. One can not inform them. Because Imam Shurunbulali is arguing that it is better not to inform them. أولى. Someone doesn't have the strength to fast, or they're weak. They're elderly, they're weak, or they're a recovering sick person. You saw them eating forgetfully when they're fasting. That's Imam Shurunbulali is saying it's better not to tell them that you're fasting, by the way. Imam Ibn al-Humam, his expression, which this is based on, is wasi'ahu. One can. Right? One is allowed not to tell them, meaning exercise your judgment. Right? Because if it's only slight hardship, right, versus significant hardship. So this is the first case, right? Right? So he says, لما فيه من قطع الرزق, right? Because it's better not to inform them, because you are cutting off this divine rizq, the rizq that was mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, mentioned before, right? That if someone eats forgetfully, that was just rizq that Allah sent them, right? This is Imam Shurunbulali tweaking the argument of Imam Ibn al-Humam by looking at the indication of the hadith, and a number of the Hanafi hadith commentators that are said similarly. وَاللُّطْفْ بِهِ, and out of gentleness for the person. سواء كان شيخا أو شابا, whether the person is elderly or child, or young. Shab meaning young, elderly, or shab meaning not elderly. The consideration being طاقة الصوم بلا مشقة, are they able to fast without hardship or not? That's one case. Another case that does not break the fast is, oh, this goes back. So one case is eating, drinking, or intercourse forgetfully. Second is, أو أنزل بنظر إلى فرج امرأة لم يفسد أو فكر وإن أدام النظر والفكر. If someone experiences ejaculation by merely looking without any physical act on their behalf or on their part, such as looking at the private parts of a woman or the opposite sex, this does not break the fast. Or if they were thinking about that which caused them to ejaculate, even if they looked extensively or thought extensively. حتى أنزل لأنه لم يوجد منه صورة الجماع, because the form of the intercourse did not take place, ولا معناه, nor its meaning. What is the meaning of intercourse? وهو الإنزال عن مباشرة, and that is ejaculation through taking direct means, which would be through masturbation, right? والعياذ بالله. ولا يلزم من الحرمة الإفطار, and even though this is prohibited, it does not entail that it breaks the fast. So it is prohibited to reflect on the haram in general. You cannot actively engage in sexual thoughts in Ramadan, even sexual thoughts that are permissible of one's spouse, etc. Not allowed. Right? But that does not break the fast. Right? So ejaculation through merely looking or thinking without anything direct to cause the ejaculation would not break the fast. وفعل المرأتين بلا إنزال منهما لا يفسد, and the action of two women, right? Their mutual stimulation without ejaculation from them does not break the fast. But if ejaculation takes place, some of the Hanafi fuqaha gave fatwa that it breaks their fast, but that's out of warning against the action. أو الدهن, or if one applies duhun, oils one's skin, lam yufsid, it doesn't break the fast, because even though the skin, because what's the shubha of applying oil? That the skin absorbs the oil. But even the oil, is oil a substance that would invalidate the fast?
Yes.
Yes. But you need وصول مفطر معتبر إلى جوف معتبر من منفذ معتبر, right? A recognized invalidator. So yes, as a substance, this is recognized that this is a substance that would invalidate, but it has to reach a recognized body cavity. Are we sure that it's reached your body cavity? No, but even if it did, it has to be from a recognized point of entry, so it doesn't. كما لو اغتسل, likewise, meaning the fast is not invalidated if one does ghusl. ووجد برد الماء في كبده, and one felt the coolness of the water within one, that is just sensation. Now there's a narration from Imam Abu Hanifa that he disliked people to sit in water during fasting, and it's not out of fear that water will somehow go in, but rather it's للتضجر, right? idharu dajar, or it's called at-tadajjur. You know, making it look like your fast is heavy. It's nothing wrong. You want to take a shower, you want to take a bath, someone goes to the gym, so they want to go, do their routine of swimming. None of that is disliked in Ramadan. What Imam Abu Hanifa disliked someone to sit in water is if you do it out of worry, I don't, unless someone is really that elderly, that's a separate matter, right? But out of the weariness of fasting, right? Like, what is this fast? So let's say, okay, you just sit in water all day. That's bad adab. أو اكتحل, or one applies kuhul, right? So now kuhul as a substance, would it break the fast?
Yes.
Yeah. But does applying kuhul to the one applies kuhul to the lip of the eyelid, and let's say you do that and you find in your throat the taste of وَلَوْ وَجَدَ طَعْمَهُ, you find the taste of the kuhul. That's not a manfadh mu'tabar. That is not a recognized point of entry. The eyes are not a recognized point of entry into the body cavity. أي طعم الكحل, you find the taste of the kuhul في حلقه, in your throat. أو لونه في بزاقه, or the color of the kuhul in one's saliva. أو نخامته أو نخامته, or in one's mucus. في الأصح, according to the more correct of two opinions. وهو قول الأكثر, and this is the opinion of the majority. سواء كان مطيبا أو غيره, whether the kuhul is perfumed or not. وتفيد مسألة الاكتحال ودهن الشارب الآتية أنه لا يكره للصائم شم رائحة المسك والورد ونحوه مما لا يكون جوهرا متصلا كالدخان. And from the issue of applying kuhul and oiling one's mustache, that will be coming, that it is not disliked, it's often ignored, right? For the fasting person to smell musk, perfume, or a rose, or other things that doesn't have a discernible jawhar, that to smell something that whose smell does not have a discernible essence. كالدخان. What is an example of a discernible body is like smoke. So if you they're different. If you apply perfume and you smell it, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with applying perfume in Ramadan. Nothing wrong with smelling the perfume in Ramadan. The difference between that and burning incense, for example, the smoke is considered a discernible body. Now, when it dissipates, it doesn't have a discernible body. Right? So if you burn incense far away from you, and of course it affects the smell of the room, that it's now dissipated, it's not considered to have a discernible body. But if you smell the body of the incense, it breaks the fast. But it's contrary to caution to burn incense during the day in Ramadan. Contrary to caution, generally. If you do and you keep away from it, right? So there's two cases. Are you clearly, discernibly smelling the smoke itself? Like what you're smelling in, was there clear smoke there? Yes, that would break the fast. If it was avoidable. Now, if you're sitting in a room and suddenly, that's a separate issue. We'll look at that when we come to the issue of what breaks the fast. Right? This is best mentioned. فإنهم قالوا لا يكره الاكتحال بحال. Applying kuhul is not makruh at all, meaning during the fast. وهو شامل للمطيب وغيره, and that includes perfumed or non-perfumed kuhul. وَلَمْ يَخُصُّهُ بِنَوْعٍ مِّنْهُ, and did not specify one type or the other. And here Imam Shurunbulali is pointing to an issue that you have to notice, which is that مفاهيم الكتب حجة. The indications of books are a proof. So when they said that kuhul is permitted in Ramadan, meaning all forms of kuhul, but the talib al-ilm needs to notice this kind of indication, but they have to confirm it. Because the talib ilm is seeking al-fahm al-sahih. ولا يتأكد من الفهم الصحيح إلا بالتصحيح. Like one doesn't know that what I understood, is it correct? Unless you validate what you understood. But you see how Imam Shurunbulali is teaching through the text. وَلَوْ وَضَعَ فِي عَيْنَيْهِ لَبَنًا أو دواء مع الدهن فوجد طعمه في حلقه لا يفسد صومه إذ لا عبرة بما يكون من المسام. Right? If one puts some milk in one's eyes or some medication with oil, right? So some milk in one's eyes, because they used to use milk, but sometimes slightly soured milk, or they would use the milk of camels for treatment. Or you put medication with the oil, i.e. on one's skin. فَوَجَدَ طَعْمَهُ فِي حَلْقِهِ, but one found its taste in one's throat. Right? So someone, they rubbed perfumed oil, or or an oil itself that has strong smell, like eucalyptus oil. Then you can taste it in your saliva. This doesn't break the fast because there's no consideration to that which enters through one's body pores. Right? وَلَوْ ابْتَلَعَ نَحْوَ عَنَبَ مَرْبُوطَ بِخَيْطٍ. Now he mentions an issue that actually they say that this was a test that Imam Abu Hanifa ran on his students. If one swallows the like of a single grape tied with thread, ثُمَّ أَخْرَجَهُ, and then one takes it out, لم يفطر, it doesn't break one's fast. This is as long as the grape comes out whole. Why would he ask them this kind of question? To test what does it mean for something to enter. And those sometimes you test something, its applications become clearer later. So there's all kinds of exams. People, doctors insert things from the mouth, from the nose into the body cavity, or there's women are or something is inserted through the rear, or through the front of a woman. If some part of it remains outside and it comes out, what happens? The fast is not broken. But if it disappears fully inside, it does break the fast. أو أدخل أصبعه في فرجه, or if one inserts a finger into one's private parts, front or rear, and takes it out. Presumably the finger would not break, right, and disappear inside. That's what Allah. ولم يكن مبلولا بماء, and it's not wet with water. أو دهن, or with oil. لم يفسد في المختار, it doesn't break the fast. No, one doesn't do these things. It's not right? Some people would get waswasa about cleaning their private parts, right? So they would insert a finger into their passage, and that's khilaf. It's makruh. So it doesn't break. أو احتجم. So now another of the things that, and some copies don't have these issues numbered, which is, real ignorance, right? Like of modern printing, right? It just, like, I mean, it's poor practice, like, because there's a urf of modern publishing, and, but anyways, أو احتجم, or one does hijama, and one does cupping. It doesn't break the fast, because is there a muftir here?
No.
It's simple. Like, there's no muftir taking place. Nothing is entering your body cavity. لم يفسد. لأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم احتجم, because the Prophet ﷺ engaged in hijama. وهو محرم. واحتجم وهو صائم. Then the Prophet ﷺ did hijama when he was fasting. And why would this be mentioned? Because of the hadiths, right? Right? There's hadith that the one who does hijama has broken their fast. And we'll see the discussion on the things that break the fast, and require kafara. What if someone ate after this, right? 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 So he says, أو اغتاب, or one engages in ghiba. So then Imam Shurunbulali says, وحديث أفطر الحاجم والمحجوم مؤول in اتفاقا بذهاب الأجر. And the hadith that the one who does hijama or has hijama done to them breaks their fast is mu'awwal, right? Which is, in the kalam al-mu'awwal is that the one speaking it is not using the words in their literal meaning, right? So hijama applies to, so the ta'wil applies to the maqsood al-kalam. And there's several ta'wils. One is that it's referring to it diminishing the reward, or arguably more strongly, أفطر الحاجم والمحجوم, as if you look in the various hadith commentaries, that it is feared يخاف أن يفطر أن تفطر الحجامة, okay? That it is feared that the hijama weaken the one it's done to from fasting, right? Because some people are affected by hijama, right? Like blood is taken, so the person feels weak. There's some people who are used to giving blood or drawing blood through cupping. So, and until you have it done, you don't know whether you have this, how your body will react, right? So, there's nothing wrong with hijama in Ramadan unless you fear that it weaken you from fasting, right? And of course, as Tahtawi says, this should have been mentioned before the ghiba. Now, the ghiba, um, right? There's a nice definition here. Some nice Imam Tahtawi defines ghiba, etc. You can see it there, and but because again, the hadiths on fasting, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that the one who back backbites, etc., they have no fast, but meaning that they lose the reward of the fast. But how does it work? The hadith said if someone does A, they don't have reward for B. How is it understood by the fuqaha? Right? Is that you are rewarded for the fast itself in accordance to its sincerity of the fast itself. Then the bad deed, how does bad deed affect a good deed? Right? And there's different interpretation, but broadly, certainly in the Hanafi school, the good deed, someone fasted sincerely, but they engage in backbiting. The net result, it diminishes the reward of your fast. How does it diminish the reward of your fast? You have the reward of the sincerity of your fast. All the bad deeds you do, you sin for the bad deeds, so it reduces the reward of the good deed. So, but then how do they have no reward? Because, and this is of the many hadiths, the fact that you fast, and we know how great the reward of fasting is. That the one who engages in backbiting has no reward for their fast. They are rewarded fully for their fast. But it's pointing as well to the gravity of the reward of backbiting. Because we know how great in it. كل عالم كل the hadith قدسي كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصيام فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. All the actions of the human being are for them, right? Except for the fast. The fasting is for me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I reward it. And Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, I think it's in Lata'if al-Ma'arif, mentions many interpretations. Some mention over 40 interpretations. I forget if it's Ibn Rajab, of what it means that fasting is for me. Any talib ilm worth who cares about the akhirah should have Lata'if al-Ma'arif, right? I've seen Imam Zayd walking with Lata'if al-Ma'arif for 25 years. I remember when he got it in Damascus because it was kind of new, right? He'd recently gotten it. I think he had a copy before it, but he'd recently gotten it, Dar Ibn Kathir edition. Then I saw over the years it was fraying. He even brings it to like RAS, right? Totally banged up. It's got plastic, like tape holding it together because Arab publishing frequently has self-destruct mode. Even the half decent publishers, because they don't follow standards of binding as well, but a lot of other people don't as well. Right? Lataif al-Ma'rif of Ibn Rajab, where he looks at the virtues and duties of each of the months. And it's an extensive book, but it's an amazing treasury of sunnah and hikmah and spirituality, and it's one of the great books of Islam. There are shorter works on the same subject, but that is one of the greatest of the works on the subject. And it's an easy read because على طريقة المحدثين. There's a lot of narrations and so on. And Imam Ibn Rajab writes in a very discursive style. to tell us about how grave backbiting is. That a single act of backbiting could be greater in sin than the reward of fasting a whole day. Because the backbiting, you know, the things that harm others are greater in sin than things that harm oneself. And the ulama discuss what is more grave, backbiting or deliberately leaving the obligatory prayer. And they relate that the Jumhur said backbiting is worse. Because النفع المتعدي خير من النفع القاصر والضرر المتعدي شر من الضرر القاصر. Benefit that extends to others is greater in reward than benefit limited to oneself, and harm that extends to another is worse than harm that is limited to oneself. Okay. Oh, another of the things that don't break the fast, أو نوى الفطرة ولم يفطر. Someone intended to break their fast but didn't actually do it. Because لعدم الفعل. Right? Right? So here, Nawa, right? Technically, Nawa here is what? This is بالمعنى الأعم. Right? Nawa, intended, has two broad meanings, right? Intended, right? Like, for example, there's some brother named Alif, related to Sidi Hamza. In June, he intends to go to Istanbul. Is that technically an intention? No. Because what is an intention? Is because you have azm, you have azm, right? Azm, and then when the azm gets connected with the action, that azm that connects with the action, that we can call it jazm, that is the intention. Right? But intend, like you decide in a general sense. Also, like someone says, I intend to go to Hajj next year. You didn't make intention for Hajj. That's a general meaning. That's a sort of broader lexical meaning. So Nawa al-Fitr here intends to break the fast. That doesn't break the fast, or even the active intention, right? That someone was about to drink and see the Alif, didn't know how to stop him, and he was about to put the cast iron frying pan on the stove, so he hit him on the head. Shouldn't have done. So the guy fainted before drinking the water. So he'd actually made a real intention, but doesn't break the fast. But when you made a real intention, it was sinful though. The general thing, I will do this, that may well be excused, but it's still dangerous. Anyways, there's some useful discussions in Tahtawi. They're quite good here, right? About the Maratib al-Qasd, right? And they're defined in different ways, right? Right? So this is another way of talking about it. And we saw it in the Tariq al-Muhammadiyya, correct? Khatir, mail, was it? Taraddud, mail, azm, jazm, like 5 levels, right? There's another one. They talk about the Maratib al-Qasd. This is another way of describing it. You can see it. You can diagram this one too, right? Okay. So if one intended to break the fast but didn't actually do it, it doesn't break the fast. أو دخل حلقه دخان بلا صنعه, or if smoke entered one's throat without your doing. لعدم قدرته على الامتناع, because you don't have the ability, يعني, and this is a قدرة, of course, when a قدرة المتيسرة, right? You don't have the facilitated ability. Right? So imagine if Umar Bhai decided to go on da'wah ilallah through the desert, and there's a desert storm, and he's fasting. So he called a mufti. He said, what do I do? I can't stop the and if I take a breath, there's a smoke, there's a fire, so you're enveloped in smoke. Is it an option to stop breathing? No, because you're going to die, right? Stopping breathing is not an option, right? So that is kharij al-wusa. So it's ignored, right? La darar, right? It falls under the general principle of the shara. It's understood. You have to be able to, you cannot stop breathing. So it's not avoidable. Okay? So for example, if someone is cooking and there's steam, what is unavoidable is excused, right? Well, unavoidable. You're cooking. Now, is it reasonable to tell someone when you're cooking, like you're just making, you're fasting, let's say it's outside Ramadan, you're cooking for the family, but you're fasting. So you're making whatever you're making, some steam comes up. Do you have to sort of keep away from the stove? No. You make your food and it's excused, but you don't deliberately, you don't do anything to actively breathe the smoke. فصار كبلل بقي في فمه بعد المضمضة. So this becomes like any moisture that may remain in one's mouth after madmada. It is excused, right? So when you make madmada, you rinse your mouth when fasting and you spit it out. Now, logically, would there be some, if you analyze it, would there be likely some of the moisture from the outside remains in the inside? Yes, it's excused because there's no way you can avoid that. No reasonable way. لدخوله من الأنف إذا أطبق الفم. Because similar moisture would enter the غبار, the dukhan, right? The smoke. لدخوله لدخول الدخان. Because if you close your mouth, it would enter from the nose, right? If you close mouth and nose, you're going to die, right? وفيما ذكرنا إشارة إلى أنه من أدخل بصنعه دخانا حلقه بأي صورة كان الإدخال فسد صومه. And from what we have mentioned, there is a clear indication that if one causes smoke, discernible smoke, to enter one's throat of one's own doing in any way, that one causes it to enter, one's fast breaks. سواء كان دخان عنبر, right? سواء كان دخان عنبر, أي سواء كان الدخان دخان عنبر, whether this is the smoke of amber, if burnt, right? أو عود, or عود, أو غيرهما, or other than these. حتى من تبخر بالبخور, or if you applied بخور, right? فآواه إلى نفسه, so you brought it close to yourself. واشتم دخانه, and you deliberate ishtamma. This is what pattern? Ifta'ala, right? Which is you actively breathed it in. ذاكرا لصومه, conscious that you're fasting, remembering that you're fasting. أفطر, it breaks your fast. فليتنبه له, so pay attention to this. ولا يتوهم أنه كشم الورد, and don't imagine that it is like smelling a rose. ومائه, or rose water. That they use rose water as perfume or as a cleaning agent, right? ولا يتوهم أنه كشم الورد ومائه والمسك, or that it's like smelling musk, or other perfume. لوضوح الفرق, there's a clear difference. One has a discernible body, the smoke, and the other doesn't have a discernible body. بين هواء تطيب بريح المسك, between air that became perfumed by the smell of the musk and the like, وشبهه, وبين جوهر الدخان, and between the discernible essence of the smoke. وصل إلى جوفي, and that discernible body reached your body cavity, the jawf. بفعله, of your act, and it was avoidable. وسنذكر الكفارة بشربه, and we will mention the issue of kafara being required for smoking. بشربه, شرب الدخان refers to smoking. نسأل الله العافية. And he takes the position that it does. أو دخل حلقه غبار, or if dust enters one's throat. If dust enters one's throat. وكان غبار دقيق, and it was the غبار, the dust of wheat, or flour, right? Because they're milling flour, so dust comes up because it's not avoidable, right? من الطاحون, from the mill. أو دخل حلقه ذباب, or a fly entered one's throat. دخل, it entered, not of your doing, it's excused. أو دخل أثر طعم الأدوية, right? فيه, أي في حلقه, or the taste of some medication, i.e. that you applied externally, like you applied it to your forehead or your throat, whatever, and you feel the taste in your throat. لأنه لا يمكن الاحتراز عنها, because you cannot avoid that. فلا يفسد الصوم بدخولها. So this does not break the fast. Now طعم الأدوية, this is for a different reason, right? The طعم الأدوية is you didn't take it in, but you found the taste of it, right? The others, it went in, but it was unavoidable. وهو ذاكر لصومه, right? So there's a little bit of discussion about the طعم الأدوية. One found the taste of the medication. This is if you applied it externally. If one is يعني وهو ذاكر لصومه, right? If one remembers one is fasting, meaning even if, right? وهو يعني, so here we'd say a ولو كان, even if one remembers that one is fasting. So if forgetfully, of course, none of these things break the fast, right? لما ذكرنا, because of what we have mentioned, this is not possible to avoid reasonably. أو أصبح جنوبا, or if one wakes up in a state of janaba. ولو استمر على حته يوما أو أياما, and even if one remained in janaba for a day or many. Now, as to whether it's sinful with respect to your fast, of your prayer, etc., that's a separate matter, but does not affect the validity of the fast. Let's say someone is imprisoned and they enter into janaba, but they're chained up. They're not able to. They're being fed and so on, but in janaba couldn't make, and he's faqid al-tahurain. He couldn't make ghusl, couldn't make tayammum. Doesn't affect, that may affect their ability to pray, does not affect the validity of their fast. Right? أو يوما أو أياما بالجنابة. If one remains in that state for a day or many days, like in the case of لقوله صلى الله سبحانه وتعالى فالآن باشرهن. And now you may engage in intercourse with, right? Meaning in the days of in the nights of Ramadan. لاستلزام جواز المباشرة إلى قبيل الفجر, because the permission of intercourse is for the night. So it could take place right before Fajr. So logically, it is a reasonable assumption that that one could enter into Fajr time in Janaba, and the Janaba is not related to the fast, because fasting relates to something entering your body cavity. Janaba has nothing to do with it. So, and it's also possible that, logically, if one can engage in intercourse in the night, someone could finish just before Fajr. ووقوع الغسل بعده ضرورة, and the ghusl then would necessarily happen after Fajr has entered. وقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا أصبح جنبا, and the Prophet ﷺ said, I enter Fajr requiring ghusl. وأنا أريد الصيام, and I wish to fast. وأغتسل وأصوم, and I just make ghusl and fast, as related by Abu Dawud and others. Right? And of course, what does any copy here? How does this hadith get referenced?
I have هو جزء من حديث أخرجه أبو داود. He gives the love. He says واللفظ له في الصوم باب في.
Okay. And then who else?
ونحوه عند مسلم في الصيام, and that's it.
Yeah, they all take each other's takhrij, right? Okay. And say, so there's multiple hadiths. So the Prophet ﷺ relating that he would enter Fajr time, requiring ghusl, and then he would fast. And say that Aisha also relates it from him, radiallahu ta'ala anha. Right? أو صب في إحليله ماء أو دهنا. What is the إحليل? Yeah. If one pours into one's urinary tract for men water or oil, لا يفطر عند أبي حنيفة ومحمد خلافا لأبي يوسف. This doesn't break the fast, according to Abu Hanifa and Muhammad, خلافا لأبي يوسف, contrary to Abu Yusuf. فيما إذا وصل إلى المثانة. Abu Yusuf differed if it reached the mathana. What is the mathana?
The intestines, or could also be bladder.
Okay. Unless it reached deeper within the but it's not likely, right? That's the thing. It's not likely, and this is not. So that's the difference of Abu Yusuf, right? But according to Imam Abu Hanifa, because that is not a manfadh mu'tabar, right? This is the male, the male urinary tract. From there, it's not likely that it'll go all the way in to the body cavity, right? ومبنى الخلاف يعني أما ما دام في قصبة الذكر, as long as it remains within the male organ, there's agreement it doesn't break the fast. وابن الخلاف على منفذ الجوف من المثانة وعدمه, and that beyond so the mathana is beyond the urinary tract within the penis itself. So where does the body cavity begin there, right? and they differed. That doesn't reach a recognized body cavity. Right? وَالْأَظْهَرْ أَنَّهُ لَا مَنْفَذَ لَهُ. And the more evident opinion is that this is not connected to the body cavity. وإنما يجتمع البول في المثانة بالترشيح كذا تقوله الأطباء. Rather, the urine gathers there gradually, right? And that's what the doctors say, right? So of course, this goes back to what is considered part of the body cavity is determined. It's not a fiqh matter. What is the body cavity as understood by the ulama, but what is it practically is determined by medical doctors, right? And the research there, capably summarized by Sheikh Ustad Wasim Hussein, is worth checking out, and we're putting it with this course in the course resources. قاله الزيلعي, as mentioned by Imam al-Zaylai in the Tabi'in. أو خاض نهرا, or one swam in a river. فدخل الماء أذنه, and water entered through one's ear. لا يفسد, it doesn't break للضرورة, out of necessity. It's either out of necessity or because the ear is not a recognized point of entry into the body cavity, right? That is the other thing, right? للضرورة, right? أو لعدم اعتباره يعني منفذا right? It's not considered a recognized point of entry into the body cavity, right? Right? Because the swimming is incidental, but as Imam Tahtawi mentions in the Hashia, what does he say? Even if one deliberately makes it enter, right? So yes, so it says the Fatawa Qadi Khan said if you deliberately poured water into your ear, it would break the fast. But the Mu'tamad is no, because that's not a recognized point of entry into the body cavity. أو حك أذنه بعود, or if one scratches one's ear with a stick, or like like a Q-tip or one of these cotton swabs, right? فخرج عليه درن, so there's wax that comes out. مما في السماخ, from within. ثم أدخله, and then one makes it enter again, the stick, repeatedly into the ear. لا يفسد صومه, right? This does not break the fast. بالإجماع عندنا. Ijma' here is referring to in our madhab, right? وفيه خلاف الشافعية, right? Right? In the Shafi'i school, if you insert something into your ear, into your inner ear cavity, and you take it out, and you insert it back in, it would break the fast. So one should avoid doing that in Ramadan. Or they say if you stick a finger in, wipe it away before sticking it in again. And we were stuck once in a traffic jam with a Shafi'i faqih, who I won't name. And we got stuck in the traffic jam. We're going to Sheikh Ahmad Snowbar's house in Zarqa. The huge traffic jam. So we got stuck. So the Sheikh, I'm not going to mention his name. And we punched him later because we were young at the time, but because it was in a taxi. So he was sitting in the front because he's the most senior of us. So he very dramatically, like he put his sleeves and took a tissue paper, rolled it up. It says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. نويت الإفطار لله تعالى اللهم بك صمت وبك أمنت. وعلى رزقك أفطر. That's when Sheikh Ahmed punched him hard from behind. Because وين الرزق? Where's the provision? And he inserted it into his ear, moved it around, took it out, and inserted it. Said, Bismillah. Right? And then he repeated the dua. And then we reached the masjid. The rest of us broke the fast there. But anyways, yeah, so this in our madhab does not break the fast. But the ijma', be careful, right? When in the books of our madhab, they're talking about our madhab, right? And this is terminology. But then you have some people that's like, beware of critics, right? Because, as the poet said, لَيْسَ لِلْعُذَّالِ فِعْلُ. Critics they're not up to anything. Because if you had time, you'd busy yourself doing stuff. Don't think ill of critics, but just ignore them, right? And the spirit of deen is spirit of nasiha. So be wary of those who are always out there criticizing others and so on. That the Hanafis this and the Hanafis that. Be careful, because do you know what they're saying? If you don't, then don't. Just be quiet. And just in general, be wary of critics. The usage of the Hanafi fuqaha when they talk about ijma', it's our usage. Al-ijma' is ijma'u a'immati madhabina, right? It's the agreement of the ulama of our madhab. And there's many other examples. Ijma' is used in different ways in different contexts. One of the great imams of Islam, Imam Ibn Abdul Barr, in one of the great works of Islam, Al-Istithkar, one of the most brilliant of the commentaries on the Muwatta of Imam Malik, he uses ijma' to talk about general agreement of the ulama, not absolute agreement. Right? كما في البزازية لعدم وصول المفطر إلى الدماغ. Right? Because the muftir, the invalidator does not reach the dimagh, the brain cavity. And we'll stop here for today. We'll stop at the nose بإذن الله تعالى. أو دخل أنفه. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.